In the earliest epochs of recorded human history, where the line between legend and reality remains blurred, there arose a figure whose name would echo through millennia: Gilgamesh, the demigod king of Uruk. His story is embedded deep within the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, in a city that stood as a testament to the burgeoning power of civilization. Uruk was not merely a city of stone and mortar. It was a symbol of human achievement, culture, and divine favor. At its heart stood Gilgamesh, a ruler whose very nature was forged at the crossroads of the mortal and the divine. To understand Gilgamesh's beginnings, one must first turn to his parents, whose identities and legacies shaped the king's existence. His father, Lugalbanda, was no ordinary mortal. He was a king whose name was already shrouded in legend by the time Gilgamesh ascended the throne. Lugalbanda's reign over Uruk was a chapter marked by both historical reality and mythic embellishment, blending human endeavors with divine intervention. Tales of his survival through perilous journeys and his close relationship with the gods suggested a ruler favored by the heavens, a man who existed on the border of the mortal and immortal realms. Lugalbanda was known as the young man of the god, an epithet that implied a special status among kings and a connection to the divine order. His exploits were recorded as heroic in nature. He survived battles, braved wildernesses, and was said to have been granted protection by gods such as Anu and Enlil. These stories, while part myth, reflected the qualities that would be passed down to his son: strength, resilience, and a right to rule endorsed by the cosmos itself. The role Lugalbanda played was foundational. Through him, Gilgamesh inherited the mantle of kingship and the challenges that came with it. The queen and mother of Gilgamesh was Ninsun, a goddess whose presence in Mesopotamian mythology was revered for wisdom, nurturing, and spiritual guidance. Ninsun's epithet, the wild cow, reflected her association with fertility and the untamed natural world. Unlike other deities who governed aspects of destruction or war, Ninsun embodied a gentler, more profound divine force. She was connected to the earth's abundance, to pastoral life, and to the sacred mysteries that guided human existence. Her divine nature was unique among the pantheon, bridging the gap between the celestial and the terrestrial in a manner that brought a nurturing aspect to the royal lineage. The union of Lugalbanda and Ninsun symbolized the meeting of the human and divine, a blending that produced Gilgamesh as a being of extraordinary power and complexity. According to the mythological traditions, Gilgamesh was 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a ratio that not only elevated him above ordinary humans, but also foreshadowed the tension between his divine gifts and human limitations. This duality defined his character and reign. It was the source of both his greatness and his eventual trials. Uruk itself, the city over which Gilgamesh ruled, was among the most advanced urban centers of its time. Situated on the banks of the Euphrates River, Uruk was a hub of trade, religion, and governance. Its sprawling walls and monumental architecture symbolized the might of its rulers and the achievements of its inhabitants. The city's temples, dedicated to gods such as Anu and Inanna, were not just places of worship, but also centers of political and economic power. Within this vibrant setting, Gilgamesh's role was both king and divine representative, a figure charged with maintaining order between the forces of chaos and civilization. The social and political structure of Uruk during Gilgamesh's early reign was a reflection of the broader Mesopotamian world. Kingship was not merely a political position. It was a sacred duty bestowed by the gods. The king was expected to uphold justice, protect the people, and ensure the prosperity of the land. However, the exercise of power was fraught with challenges. The king's authority was constantly balanced against the will of the gods, the power of priests, and the needs of the populace. Gilgamesh's rule, in this context, was an act of negotiation between these competing forces. From the outset, Gilgamesh was distinguished by his physical prowess and commanding presence. Descriptions of him emphasize his towering stature, radiant appearance, and unmatched strength. Ancient accounts portray him as a paragon of physical perfection, muscular, tall, and endowed with a face so striking it inspired awe and fear. His might was said to surpass that of any other man, a physical manifestation of his divine heritage. This corporeal power translated directly into his capacity to rule and protect Uruk, as well as to impose his will. Despite his undeniable strength and achievements, Gilgamesh's early kingship was marked by an authoritarian streak that sowed discord among his subjects. His exercise of power was sometimes brutal and unchecked. Accounts suggest that he imposed harsh demands upon his people, exacting labor and tribute with little regard for their welfare. His personal arrogance and disregard for social customs bred fear and resentment. He was described as claiming the right of the first night with brides, a symbol of his domination over the city's inhabitants, and as acting in ways that disregarded the rights and dignity of his subjects. This tyrannical aspect of Gilgamesh's reign provides insight into the complexities of his character. His divine nature gave him strength beyond human norms, but it also seemed to detach him from the empathy and restraint expected of a just ruler. His early rule was therefore a period of imbalance, a powerful king whose actions threatened the harmony of the city and provoked unrest. This imbalance was not merely political, but cosmic, as the gods themselves grew concerned with the king's excesses. The intervention of the gods in the affairs of Uruk highlights the intricate relationship between divine will and human governance in Mesopotamian mythology. To counter Gilgamesh's unchecked power, the gods fashioned a being to challenge and temper him. Enkidu, a wild man created from clay in the wilderness. Enkidu's role was to act as a foil to Gilgamesh's tyranny, a force capable of matching the king's strength and, through their confrontation, transforming his character. This divine strategy reveals the god's interest in restoring balance and justice within human society. Before Enkidu's arrival, Gilgamesh's deeds were largely defined by conquest and domination. He was a formidable hunter and warrior, celebrated for his ability to overcome natural and human adversaries alike. His military campaigns expanded Uruk's influence, and his architectural projects, including the famed city walls, were expressions of his desire for lasting legacy. The walls themselves were not just defensive structures, but symbolic boundaries between civilization and chaos, erected through the king's will and strength. The city of Uruk under Gilgamesh was a place of vibrant life and stark contrasts. Its markets bustled with trade goods from distant lands. Its temples buzzed with religious activity. Its streets echoed with the footsteps of artisans, laborers, priests, and soldiers. Yet beneath this vitality lay the tensions born of an authoritarian ruler whose power was absolute. The king's relationships with his subjects were defined by fear as much as respect, and this uneasy dynamic shaped the social fabric of the city. Throughout this period, the interplay between Gilgamesh's divine ancestry and mortal responsibilities remained central to his identity. His mother Ninsun's influence was a constant, though subtle, force in his life. Revered for her wisdom, she was believed to offer spiritual guidance and protection, underscoring the sacred nature of Gilgamesh's kingship. This divine connection framed his authority not just as a political reality, but as a cosmic mandate. The tension between divine favor and mortal limitation would become a defining theme in Gilgamesh's narrative. While his divine heritage granted him power and prestige, it also imposed expectations and consequences. His extraordinary strength and near immortality and fame stood against the reality of human vulnerability and death. This paradox was the crucible in which his character was forged, setting the stage for the transformative journey that would follow. In the broader context of Mesopotamian civilization, Gilgamesh's reign represents a critical juncture in the evolution of kingship and myth. His story captures the aspirations and anxieties of early urban society, the desire for order and security, the fear of tyranny, and the search for meaning in a world governed by capricious gods. Through his exploits and excesses, Gilgamesh embodied the struggle to balance power with justice, strength with wisdom. The legacy of his early kingship is immortalized not only in the monumental ruins of Uruk, but also in the enduring myths that have survived thousands of years. These narratives reveal the complexity of a ruler who was at once divine and human, a king who ruled with strength but had yet to learn the limits of that power. His origins, marked by the union of Lugalbanda and Ninsun, provided the foundation for a life that would explore the boundaries of existence, power, and mortality. When the gods looked upon the city of Uruk, they saw a kingdom radiant in wealth and splendor but burdened by imbalance. The king who ruled its walls had become a force too mighty to exist without restraint. Gilgamesh's power, untempered by mercy, pressed heavily upon his people. The order of heaven demanded harmony among all things. Between the divine and the mortal, the ruler and the ruled, the wild and the civilized. To restore this equilibrium, the gods resolved to create a being who would stand as Gilgamesh's equal and his opposite, a mirror through which the king might come to understand himself. Thus, they called upon Uruk, the goddess of creation, to shape a new life from the essence of the natural world. From the clay of the wilderness, Uruk molded a man of immense stature and strength. His body was fashioned from the fertile earth, and the spirit of the untamed lands flowed within him. When she breathed life into her creation, the winds stirred the grasses of the plains, and the animals lifted their heads in recognition. This being, named Enkidu, was the embodiment of the natural order, a man without city, law, or ambition. His existence was pure, his soul uncorrupted by the burdens of civilization. He was the living image of nature's vitality, unbounded and free. Enkidu roamed the steppe in harmony with the beasts. He shared their pastures, drank from their watering holes, and moved with the rhythm of the earth. The gazelles raced beside him. The lions watched him without fear. Even the serpents coiled in his presence without striking. His strength was beyond measure, and his endurance knew no limit. When hunters set traps for the animals, Enkidu destroyed them, freeing the creatures from captivity. He was guardian and companion to the wild, the defender of a life untouched by the hands of men. His existence in the wilderness was one of balance and innocence, yet it could not remain isolated from the world of humanity forever. Word of the wild man spread across the plains until it reached the ears of those who lived within Uruk's domain. Hunters spoke of him with awe, describing a figure of immense power who thwarted their labors and seemed impervious to all pursuit. To the people of Uruk, suffering under the harshness of their king, these tales carried the echo of divine intervention. They believed the gods had sent this being as a counterweight to Gilgamesh, a protector born from the earth itself. The boundary between nature and civilization was not absolute, and Enkidu's crossing from one world to the other marked the beginning of transformation. Not only his, but Gilgamesh's as well. Enkidu's introduction into human society was a process of gradual awakening, a symbolic transition from instinct to consciousness, from freedom to duty. The wild man who once lived among the animals began to learn the ways of humankind, the cultivation of crops, the rituals of worship, and the order of the city. As he became more human, the beasts that had once accompanied him turned away, no longer recognizing their former companion. His bond with nature loosened, replaced by an awareness of his new identity and purpose. When Enkidu approached the city of Uruk for the first time, the sight of its walls was unlike anything he had ever known. The towering fortifications glistened beneath the Mesopotamian sun, rising from the plains like a monument to human ambition. The great temples, adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, shone with divine brilliance. The noise of civilization, the clang of metal, the rhythm of construction, the murmur of crowds filled the air, contrasting with the silent expanse of the wilderness he had left behind. For the first time, Enkidu beheld the full extent of human achievement, a world shaped by will and labor rather than instinct and chance. Within those walls lived Gilgamesh, the king whose strength rivaled that of the gods. His presence dominated Uruk as completely as the walls encompassed it. He was a man of immense power, his divine heritage granting him near boundless energy and ambition. Yet his rule, though glorious in its achievements, was marred by excess and oppression. The people, though proud of their city's splendor, whispered prayers for deliverance from the burdens of their king's tyranny. The gods had heard those prayers, and Enkidu had been created as their answer. The meeting of Gilgamesh and Enkidu was more than the encounter of two men. It was the convergence of two forces: civilization and wilderness, control and freedom. When the two finally stood before one another, each recognized the other as his equal. Their confrontation was said to have shaken the foundations of Uruk. The dust of the city rose in clouds as the two titans struggled, neither yielding ground. The citizens watched in awe, for never before had they seen their king's strength met and matched. The clash of these two figures was not a battle of hatred, but of destiny, ordained by the gods to restore harmony to creation. Neither prevailed, for the contest was not meant to end in victory or defeat. Instead, it was the recognition of equality that transformed both men. Gilgamesh, who had never encountered resistance, saw in Enkidu a reflection of his own might, a mirror that showed him the boundaries of his power. Enkidu, who had lived as nature's child, found in Gilgamesh a kindred strength directed toward purpose and achievement. Out of conflict emerged companionship, and from companionship came understanding. The two were bound together not by blood or oath, but by the shared realization of their place in the world. Their friendship grew swiftly and profoundly, transcending the ordinary bonds of alliance or loyalty. Each complemented the other's nature. Enkidu brought to Gilgamesh a sense of humility and perspective, tempering the king's excesses. Gilgamesh offered Enkidu direction and meaning, transforming his raw strength into purposeful action. Together, they represented the unity of opposites, the synthesis of nature and civilization, instinct and reason, freedom and order. This harmony between the wild man and the king reflected the cosmic balance the gods had sought to restore. Under Enkidu's influence, the city of Uruk began to change. Gilgamesh's rule softened, his tyranny abated. The people, who had once feared their king, now revered him not only for his strength, but for his wisdom. The bond between the two men inspired confidence and hope. Gilgamesh's focus turned outward, away from oppression and toward glory. He sought deeds that would immortalize his name and bring renown to Uruk. The friendship that had begun with confrontation now became the driving force of heroism. For Enkidu, the transformation was equally profound. The wilderness that had once been his home now seemed distant, yet it lived within him as memory and spirit. He carried into civilization the essence of the natural world, reminding Gilgamesh and all of Uruk of the primal forces that underlay human existence. His presence at the king's side symbolized the reconciliation of humanity with nature, the acknowledgement that even in the heart of civilization, the wild still lived in every man. Together, Gilgamesh and Enkidu became inseparable. Their strength, united, was unmatched in all the land. They shared in labors, in triumphs, and in the pursuit of deeds that would outlast them both. Their partnership marked the beginning of a new age for Uruk, one in which power was not wielded for domination alone, but for the pursuit of glory and divine purpose. The citizens of the city began to speak of their king with reverence rather than fear, and the name of Enkidu was honored as the equal of Gilgamesh himself. The gods looked upon their creation and were satisfied. The balance had been restored, and the transformation of Gilgamesh had begun. Yet, as in all divine designs, harmony was not meant to last untested. The bond between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, though born of equilibrium, would soon drive them to challenges that would disrupt the cosmic order once again. Their friendship, while noble, carried within it the seeds of defiance. United, they would dare to face forces that even the gods had decreed untouchable. Before those trials, however, Uruk enjoyed a brief era of peace and prosperity. The partnership of the demigod king and the wild man brought stability and strength. The great walls of the city stood as both protection and symbol. The line between the civilized and the wild, between humanity and the divine. Within those walls, the people flourished, and the city shone as a jewel of Mesopotamia. In this harmony lay the first fulfillment of the god's will. Gilgamesh, once a tyrant, had become a true king. His transformation was not complete, but the path had begun. Through Enkidu, he had glimpsed the meaning of companionship and equality. He had learned that greatness, though measured in power and achievement, found its truest form in connection and understanding. And though neither man could foresee the trials that awaited them, their friendship had already altered the course of fate. The story of Enkidu's creation and his bond with Gilgamesh stands as one of the earliest and most profound explorations of human transformation. It speaks to the eternal tension between the natural and the civilized, between freedom and order, and the ways in which these forces must coexist. Enkidu's journey from the wilderness to the heart of Uruk mirrors humanity's own evolution, while Gilgamesh's transformation through friendship reveals the path by which power can become wisdom. Together, they embodied the completeness of the human experience, the wild and the tamed, the mortal and the divine. Their meeting was not an accident of fate, but the expression of a universal truth, that strength without compassion leads to tyranny, and that companionship can elevate even the mightiest toward understanding. The gods had forged Enkidu to teach Gilgamesh balance, but in doing so, they created a union that transcended divine intention. Thus ended the second great movement in the life of the demigod king, the era of transformation through friendship. It was the beginning of the heroic age of Uruk, a prelude to the trials that would follow and a testament to the enduring power of unity. The friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu would become a symbol not only of loyalty and courage, but of the fragile harmony between man, God, and nature, a harmony that must be constantly won and constantly lost. In the time that followed the unification of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the city of Uruk prospered as never before. Its walls stood firm, its temples thrived with offerings, and its people knew a season of calm unknown in living memory. The friendship of the two heroes became a living emblem of strength and harmony, admired by all who dwelt within the kingdom's bounds. Yet beneath this peace, a restlessness stirred in Gilgamesh's heart. Not of cruelty, as before, but of an unfulfilled yearning for deeds that would secure his name in eternity. He had mastered the domain of men and ruled with divine authority, but he longed for a challenge worthy of his unmatched strength. The thought of mortality, distant yet inevitable, weighed upon him like a shadow. To transcend it, he sought an act so vast that even the gods would remember. Whispers of the cedar forest reached his court, tales of an expanse of sacred woodland beyond the bounds of civilization, guarded by the fearsome spirit Humbaba. The forest, said to belong to the god Enlil, was a realm of divine beauty and danger, its trees older than empires, its air heavy with the presence of the divine. None who ventured there returned, for Humbaba, Enlil's appointed warden, was no mortal creature. His face was said to be that of a lion, twisted with the fury of storms, his breath a fire that scorched the earth, his roar a tempest that could tear mountains from their roots. The very sound of his presence was enough to unmake the will of ordinary men. The forest itself was sacred ground, its cedar trunks rising like columns of a heavenly temple, exuding the scent of divinity. The decision to confront Humbaba was not born of arrogance alone. Gilgamesh sought to prove that human strength, divine though it might be in part, could triumph even in the realms reserved for gods. Enkidu, his brother-in-arms, carried within him knowledge of the wild places and the sacred boundaries of the natural world. He understood what it meant to trespass upon the dwelling of divine spirits, and though he knew the danger, he did not abandon Gilgamesh. Their friendship, forged in equality and strengthened by shared purpose, compelled them toward the same fate. Thus began the greatest of their joint labors, an expedition into the heart of the unknown. Before they departed, the heroes offered prayers and sacrifices to the gods, seeking favor for their quest. The omens that came were mixed, as though heaven itself hesitated between blessing and warning. Yet the path was set, for Gilgamesh's will was unshakable, and Enkidu's loyalty was unwavering. They assembled their weapons, axes of iron, swords of bronze, and shields of unparalleled craftsmanship, forged by Uruk's finest smiths to match the might of their bearers. When they set out from the city gates, the people gathered to witness the departure of their king and his companion. Many wept, fearing that their ruler would never return, but Gilgamesh and Enkidu walked onward, their figures diminishing against the horizon until the city disappeared behind them. The journey to the cedar forest was long and perilous. They crossed barren plains where the wind howled through the desolation, stirring clouds of dust like spirits of the dead. They traversed mountains whose slopes gleamed with veins of copper and stone. They passed through lands where rivers ran dry beneath the sun's relentless gaze, and others where the earth was alive with verdant growth. Each step took them further from the world of men and deeper into the domain of the divine. The boundary between civilization and chaos blurred until it vanished altogether, leaving only the vastness of the primeval world. In this wilderness, Enkidu's strength and understanding of nature guided their path. He read the signs of the land, the direction of the wind, the patterns of the stars, the movements of the beasts, with the instinct of one who had once belonged wholly to the wild. Gilgamesh, though a creature of the city, moved with a purpose born of destiny. Together, they embodied the union of human intellect and natural force, the two halves of existence marching side by side into the unknown. As they neared the cedar forest, the air grew dense with fragrance and shadow. The ground beneath their feet became soft with moss, and shafts of golden light filtered through a canopy that seemed to touch the sky. The trees were immense, their trunks broad as towers, their leaves whispering in voices that seemed almost alive. The forest exuded both majesty and menace, a reminder that beauty and danger were twin aspects of the divine. Birds of strange plumage called from the branches, and unseen creatures stirred in the undergrowth. The deeper they went, the more the air trembled with an unseen power, the living essence of the god Enlil's dominion. At the heart of this sacred realm awaited Humbaba. His presence was felt before he was seen. The ground trembled, the air grew heavy with heat and sound. The guardian of the forest was not merely a beast, but a force of nature made conscious, the embodiment of divine wrath and protection. His sevenfold aura radiated terror, distorting sight and sound, filling the intruders with the sense that the world itself opposed them. Yet Gilgamesh and Enkidu advanced. They were not ignorant of fear, but they bore within them the courage of those who know their deeds will echo through time. When the guardian emerged, his form was both monstrous and magnificent. His face, framed by coils of living flame, bore the aspect of both man and storm. His eyes blazed with divine fury, and his voice was the roar of thunder over the mountains. The cedar trunks bent at his coming, and the air was rent by his power. Against such a being, no mortal could stand. Yet Gilgamesh and Enkidu were no mere men. Their combined strength met the might of the Guardian in a clash that shook the forest to its roots. The struggle that followed was not a battle of simple violence, but a contest of cosmic will. Humbaba, as servant of Enlil, fought not out of hatred, but out of divine duty. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fought for glory, yet also for a deeper truth, the assertion of human courage before the eternal. The trees shuddered, mountains echoed with the clash of their weapons, and the rivers that ran through the forest turned murky with the breath of battle. Each blow carried the weight of destiny, each moment stretching into eternity. When the dust of the conflict settled, the Guardian's strength was broken. Humbaba fell among the roots of the great trees he had guarded for ages. His fall was not only the defeat of a divine creature, but the shattering of an ancient order. The balance between gods and mortals had been altered. The cedar trees, witnesses to the struggle, seemed to weep resin like tears, their sacred fragrance thick in the air. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood victorious, yet their triumph was shadowed by an unspoken foreboding. They had won a glory beyond all men, but in doing so, they had trespassed upon the realm of the gods. They felled the sacred cedars, fashioning from them a gate for the temples of Uruk, a symbol of their victory and of human dominion over nature. Yet the act was not one of mere pride. It carried a sacred intention. The wood was consecrated, the craftsmanship divine. Still, the felling of the trees was an act of defiance against the divine order, and such defiance would not go unanswered. The scent of cedar carried upward to the heavens, and with it rose the cries of the forest spirits mourning their fallen guardian. In the celestial court, Enlil beheld what had transpired and was filled with wrath. Humbaba had been his appointed warden, the living boundary between mortal and divine. His death was an affront not only to his power, but to the order of creation itself. The gods deliberated upon the punishment that must follow. Some spoke in admiration of the hero's courage. Others demanded retribution. For though Gilgamesh and Enkidu had acted out of valor, they had broken a sacred taboo. The boundary between earth and heaven could not be crossed without consequence. Meanwhile, the heroes returned to Uruk, their journey marked by the scent of cedar and the glory of victory. The people rejoiced at their arrival, and songs were sung in their honor. The gates of the city were adorned with the sacred wood of the forest, and the story of Humbaba's fall spread across the land. Gilgamesh, once a tyrant feared, was now celebrated as a hero whose deeds rivaled those of the gods themselves. Enkidu stood beside him, his transformation complete, no longer a creature of the wilderness, but a hero of civilization. Yet the triumph of Uruk was short-lived, for divine punishment follows swiftly upon mortal pride. The gods had seen the boundaries transgressed, and their judgment would come through the most terrible of trials. The death of Humbaba was not the end of Gilgamesh's ascent, but the beginning of his descent toward loss and understanding. The cedar gates stood as both monument and warning, symbols of human achievement and the price it must pay. The slaying of Humbaba marked the culmination of the hero's might, but it also exposed the fragility of their defiance. They had touched the realm of immortals and lived, yet in doing so, they had invited the wrath of heaven. The gods, in their deliberation, would soon send forth another challenge, one that would pierce their unity and bring the lesson that strength alone could not overcome fate. The cedar gates of Uruk stood gleaming beneath the sun, immense and fragrant, their polished surface a testament to the deeds of the two who had returned from the forbidden forest. The scent of the sacred wood filled the air, mingling with the dust of celebration. Songs rose from every street, the voices of men and women praising the king who had conquered the guardian of Enlil's forest and returned with glory and spoils. Gilgamesh, the demigod ruler, stood before his people as one transformed, not the tyrant of old, but the embodiment of divine courage. Beside him stood Enkidu, the wild man made civilized, equal in renown and stature. Together they had achieved what no mortal had dared imagine. Yet the walls of Uruk, built to outlast all kings, seemed to whisper in their silence of consequences unseen. The gods, who had once smiled upon the transformation of Gilgamesh, now regarded his triumph with unease. The slaying of Humbaba was no mere mortal feat. It was an intrusion into the sacred order. Humbaba had been no ordinary guardian. He was the appointed servant of Enlil, Lord of Wind and Earth, entrusted with protecting the cedar forest, that most sacred domain where the divine touched the mortal world. His death was a wound upon that boundary, and the gods, eternal arbiters of balance, could not allow it to remain unanswered. In the heavens, the council of the great gods convened. The firmament shimmered with their presence, and their voices carried across the cosmic sea. Enlil spoke first, his wrath like thunder rolling through the vault of heaven. He condemned the hero's actions, declaring that the slaying of his servant was an affront to divine authority. Humbaba had been created to preserve the sanctity of the world, and his death had unleashed a chaos that would ripple across creation. To leave such defiance unpunished would invite mortals to overstep their bounds again and again, until the order of the universe itself crumbled. Other gods, however, did not share Enlil's fury in full measure. Some admired the bravery of the two heroes, seeing in them the spirit of creation itself, the spark of the divine that compels mortals to strive beyond their limits. Yet admiration could not erase transgression. In their deliberation, the gods found unity in one truth. Balance must be restored, and that restoration must come through suffering. Thus was determined the first act of divine retribution, the sending of the bull of heaven. This celestial creature, born from the firmament and sustained by the breath of the god Anu, was the instrument of wrath that the gods loosed upon earth in times of cosmic imbalance. Its descent would not merely punish, it would remind mankind of its place beneath the heavens. Its hooves would shake the ground, its breath would bring famine, and its charge would lay waste to cities. The bull's coming was not vengeance alone, but the reassertion of divine law. The summons for the bull of heaven came from the higher realms, from the stables of the sky, where the constellations grazed upon the meadows of eternity. The divine creature was led forth. Its eyes burned like suns, and its body shone with the luster of polished bronze. The motion of its limbs stirred winds upon the earth, and the beat of its heart was felt as tremors beneath mountains. When it lowered its head, the horizon darkened. When it bellowed, the stars themselves seemed to waver. As it descended toward the earth, the ground quaked, and the rivers withdrew in terror from its path. The sky dimmed, though the sun still shone, and the air filled with the scent of ash and storm. In Uruk, the people trembled. Crops withered where its shadow passed, and wells cracked as if scorched from within. The bull of heaven descended upon the plains of Mesopotamia, and its hooves split the soil into ravines. Each step brought death, each breath drew famine. The herds fled, the birds vanished, and the wind itself seemed to cry out. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, beholding the devastation, understood the nature of what had been unleashed. The gods had sent their judgment in a form no mortal could withstand. Yet their bond, forged through battle, tempered through friendship, left no room for retreat. The heroes who had defied the divine once before would now confront it again, not from arrogance, but from necessity. The survival of Uruk depended upon them. The people who had once feared their king now looked to him as their only defense against annihilation. The bull rampaged through the fields surrounding the city, its tail lashing like a living storm. Each strike tore open chasms that swallowed men and beasts alike. The Euphrates, sacred lifeblood of the region, turned murky with the dust of collapsed earth. The gates of Uruk trembled under the weight of its approach. The city that had been a symbol of order and civilization now faced the raw fury of divine creation. The same power that once gave life now turned to destruction. Enkidu, who had once been the embodiment of nature's harmony, recognized in the bull not merely wrath, but imbalance. The creature was not evil. It was divine force misaligned, a manifestation of cosmic correction gone wild. Yet even understanding could not halt its path. The wild man and the demigod king took up their weapons and prepared for battle, knowing that to stand against such a being was to risk annihilation. The struggle that followed was unlike any fought upon Earth. The bull's bellow turned fields to wasteland, and its hooves sent forth waves of destruction. The heroes, moving with a coordination born of countless trials, struck in unison. Gilgamesh's strength met Enkidu's instinct. Human will joined with natural force. They moved not as two, but as one. The union of civilization and wilderness against the chaos of divine wrath. The battle raged across the plain. The dust of the earth rose in storms. The light of heaven flickered under the force of the bull's fury. Yet the heroes endured. Their weapons bit deep, their movements precise, their resolve unbroken. With each strike, they reaffirmed the mortal spirit's defiance of inevitability. In the end, the bull of heaven fell, its immense body collapsing upon the earth it had ravaged. The ground shook with its death, and the heavens shuddered in response. The air grew still, heavy with the scent of divine blood and dust. The creature that had been the embodiment of cosmic balance now lay silent, its defeat both a triumph and a curse. Uruk was spared. Its walls, though cracked and scorched, still stood. The people, witnessing the fall of the divine creature, rejoiced in awe and terror. Their king and his companion had saved them once more, but the act had crossed yet another sacred line. For the slaying of Humbaba had angered one god. The slaying of the bull had affronted them all. The boundaries between heaven and earth, already stretched thin, now trembled on the edge of collapse. The triumph of the heroes was the beginning of their undoing. The gods, who had watched the battle in silence, now turned their gaze upon Enkidu. It was he who had first struck the bull. It was he who had defied the will of heaven most directly. And so, though the punishment would fall upon both, the decree of fate singled out one. Enkidu, who had been created by the gods to balance Gilgamesh, would now be taken to restore the equilibrium once more. In the heavens, the decision was made. Life would be reclaimed from the one who had dared to wield it in defiance of its source. The death of Enkidu was not vengeance alone. It was a restoration, the sealing of a cycle that had begun when he was shaped from the clay of the wilderness. The bond that had transformed Gilgamesh would be severed, and through that loss, the king would learn the truth of mortality. The fate of Enkidu was sealed in silence, unseen by mortals. Yet its shadow began to stretch across Uruk as the days passed. The celebration of victory gave way to unease. The wild man who had once been indestructible began to weaken. His strength faltered, his steps slowed, and a weariness unknown to him before crept through his limbs. The balance of life within him, the pulse of divine vitality, had begun to ebb. In the days following the fall of the Bull of Heaven, Uruk appeared as a city poised between glory and dread. The streets that had echoed with the sounds of celebration now carried a quieter tone, as though the very stones sensed that triumph had come at too great a cost. The cedar gates gleamed still in the sunlight, yet their brilliance seemed to wane, dulled by an unseen shadow that settled over the city. The gods had been challenged twice, and twice had been defied. Such acts could not pass without consequence. Enkidu, the wild-born companion of Gilgamesh, began to feel the first chill of divine retribution. The vitality that had once made him the equal of the king seemed to drain from him, as though the breath of life itself withdrew at the command of higher powers. His movements lost their fluid strength, and his body, once unyielding, now faltered beneath the weight of unseen affliction. The strength that had felled lions, shattered spears, and wrestled the bull of heaven now ebbed like the retreating tide. The city watched in uneasy silence as the once mighty warrior weakened. At first, the people believed it was exhaustion, the toll of great battle, a mortal consequence of divine combat. But as days turned into weeks and his vigor failed to return, whispers began to spread through Uruk. The old priests of the temple, versed in the will of the gods, saw in his decline the mark of celestial decree. They spoke in hushed tones that the gods had chosen their victim, that balance demanded payment, and that payment had been set upon the companion of the king. Enkidu's decline was slow, deliberate, and unrelenting, a process less of sudden smiting than of inevitable withdrawal. The same divine hands that had molded him from the clay of the steppe now reclaimed their creation piece by piece. His skin, once radiant with life, took on the pallor of dust. His eyes, that had reflected the brightness of the open plain, dimmed with each passing day. His voice, once resonant and full of command, grew faint. Yet through it all, he endured without protest. The wild man who had once belonged to the beasts and winds now faced mortality not as a beast does, but as a man, with the stillness of one who knows that his existence has completed its appointed circle. The people of Uruk mourned even before death arrived. They saw in Enkidu not only a hero, but a symbol of their own fragile condition. His suffering was a reminder that even those touched by divinity could not escape the reach of fate. In the markets, women laid offerings of bread and oil for his recovery. In the temples, priests burned incense to appease the angry gods, but the heavens remained unmoved. The decree had been spoken, and no prayer could undo what had been set into motion. As his strength faded, Enkidu's presence became a thing of reverence and sorrow. He was tended to by the servants of the temple, who cleansed his body and anointed him with fragrant oils. The touch of sacred water cooled his fever, yet his vitality did not return. He lay upon woven mats of reeds, gazing toward the high walls of Uruk, the very walls his companion had built, and whose grandeur they had once celebrated together. Around him, the air seemed to hum with the tension between worlds, the mortal and the divine, the living and the soon to depart. In this period of decline, Gilgamesh remained ever at his side. The king's presence was constant, though silent. The bond between the two heroes, forged through struggle and triumph, now manifested in a shared endurance of loss. Gilgamesh, the demigod who had feared nothing in battle, stood powerless before the quiet undoing of his friend. The strength of the gods that had once flowed through his blood could not halt the slow hand of fate. Enkidu's suffering became a mirror in which the king saw his own mortality reflected. The priests, observing this union of strength and sorrow, interpreted it as an omen. They said that through Enkidu's passing, the divine intended to teach the ruler of Uruk the limits of human greatness. A king might build walls to outlast generations and carve his name into stone, but he could not bind life itself to permanence. Death was the equalizer of all creation, the silent judge before whom even demigods must bow. The decline stretched over many days. Each sunrise found Enkidu weaker, his breathing shallower, his body lighter, as though the earth no longer claimed him entirely. The citizens of Uruk, forbidden to enter the sacred precinct where he lay, gathered at the temple gates to wait for word. When the priests emerged each evening, their faces told the story before words could be spoken. The people wept not only for the hero, but for themselves, for they saw that the age of unmatched valor was passing away before their eyes. Then, one morning, as the first light touched the towers of Uruk and spread across the plains, Enkidu's breath ceased. The sound of mourning rose from the temple like a storm. The people tore their garments and cast dust upon their heads. The women wailed, the men struck their chests, and the priests sounded the long, low horn that signaled a hero's death. All of Uruk entered mourning, for they knew that with Enkidu's passing, a part of their own divine connection to the eternal had died as well. Gilgamesh stood before the body of his friend, motionless. The demigod king, who had faced gods and monsters, stood now before the only enemy that no blade could wound. The grandeur of Uruk, its walls and towers, its temples and treasures, all seemed hollow beside the silent form that had once been the living heart of his own transformation. Though he uttered no word, his mourning was felt throughout the city. The funeral rites began under the direction of the temple priests, guided by the traditions of ages past. The body of Enkidu was washed in pure water drawn from the Euphrates and anointed with the oils of cedar and myrrh. Fine linen garments were placed upon him, and a circlet of gold was set upon his brow. Around him, the offerings of the city were laid: food, drink, weapons, ornaments, and tokens of friendship. The craftsmen of Uruk carved a funerary bed from the same cedar wood that had brought them both fame and doom. The funeral procession wound through the streets, accompanied by solemn chants. The citizens followed, carrying torches that flickered like stars against the dimming sky. The riverbanks were lined with mourners who cast handfuls of grain into the water, invoking the spirits of the underworld to receive the fallen hero with honor. The air was thick with incense and sorrow. When the procession reached the burial ground beyond the city walls, the priests raised their hands to the heavens and to the depths below. They called upon Anu, Enlil, and Ereshkigal, queen of the dead, to accept the soul of the one who had served both gods and men. The ground was opened, and the body of Enkidu was laid within. Around the grave were placed the symbols of his life: the hunter's bow, the warrior's axe, and the lock of hair he had cut when he first entered Uruk. The mound was sealed, and upon it the king himself placed a final stone, carved with his companion's name. The mourning of Gilgamesh did not end with the funeral. In the days that followed, the city saw its ruler transformed once more. The vigor of conquest and pride that had once defined him gave way to a solemn purpose. He withdrew from the feasts and celebrations, no longer seeking the pleasures of kingship. His eyes, once bright with ambition, grew shadowed with contemplation. The death of Enkidu had stirred in him an awareness that no victory could silence the knowledge of his own mortality. As the sun set over Uruk each evening, the king would ascend the great walls he had built and gaze upon the horizon. Beyond the city's borders lay the lands he had conquered, the forests he had defied, and the rivers he had crossed. Yet beyond them, unseen and inevitable, stretched the realm of death that claimed all living things. The silence of Enkidu's tomb echoed louder in his mind than the songs of praise that rose from below. In the temples, the priests recorded the passing of Enkidu in sacred tablets, noting that the death of the wild man marked a turning in the order of the world. They wrote that through his creation, mankind had been shown the unity of nature and civilization, and through his death, they were reminded that even unity cannot overcome the law of mortality. His life had been brief but complete, a circle that began in wilderness and ended in reverence. Thus, the friendship that had changed the course of Uruk now became legend. The memory of Enkidu lingered not only in the heart of the king, but in the spirit of the people. The story of his transformation from wildness to wisdom, from solitude to companionship, became a symbol of the human condition, of the struggle between instinct and reason, freedom and duty, life and death. Yet for Gilgamesh, this realization was not enough. The death of his companion had awakened a new and terrible understanding. If one touched by the gods could die, then so too could he. The shadow that had fallen upon Enkidu now stretched toward the king himself. The great ruler of Uruk, whose fame had reached the heavens, now faced the one truth that no hero could escape. And in that truth lay the seed of his next and greatest journey, a quest that would carry him beyond the borders of the known world in search of what no mortal had ever found, the secret of eternal life. In the days and nights following the burial of Enkidu, Uruk seemed cloaked in silence. The once bustling city, where merchants shouted their wares and the music of feasts drifted through the courtyards, had fallen still. The death of the wild man, though it had struck one man most deeply, seemed to have touched every life within the city's towering walls. It was as if the heartbeat of Uruk itself had slowed in mourning. At the center of this silence stood Gilgamesh, the king whose name had been sung in the streets and whose deeds had been carved into stone. Yet now, even the songs of his victories seemed hollow to him. The cedar gates that once symbolized conquest now stood like monuments to futility. The vast city, which had been his pride, stretched before him as a fragile and temporary thing. The laughter of his people, the wealth of his treasuries, the sacred altars of the gods, all seemed diminished in the shadow of his companion's absence. The city's priests observed the king with reverent concern. They noted how the ruler of Uruk, once so full of command and vigor, had become withdrawn and quiet. His days were spent in solitude and his nights in wakefulness. He no longer attended the rituals of celebration or the councils of state. Instead, he wandered the temples and the walls of the city, his gaze ever fixed upon the horizon or upon the earth that covered his friend. Gilgamesh's mourning became more than grief. It became transformation. The loss of Enkidu had stripped him of the illusions of permanence that had once sustained his rule. He saw now that even the greatest walls would one day crumble, and that even kings, though born of gods, must yield to the law of mortality. The power that had once driven him to conquest now turned inward, reshaping his purpose. The death of Enkidu had taught him that strength could not preserve life. It could only delay its inevitable end. In the temples, the elders of Uruk recorded these days with solemn care. They wrote that the king had entered a period of sacred mourning, a ritual that transcended personal loss. For in the death of Enkidu, the gods had revealed to him the truth of all creation, that every act of greatness must eventually return to dust. The priests saw in his solitude not despair, but initiation, the first step in a spiritual passage that few mortals could endure. They knew, though he did not yet speak of it, that the king's path was turning toward the divine once more. The natural world, too, seemed to reflect the king's inner desolation. The fields around Uruk lay barren in the season that followed. The Euphrates ran lower than usual, and the winds that blew from the desert carried a taste of dust. The people whispered that the gods had taken their favor from the land, in sympathy with the grief of the demigod king. Yet others said that the earth itself mourned Enkidu, the wild-born son of the steppe, who had bridged the world of beasts and men. At night, the city glowed faintly under the starlit sky. The towers cast long shadows over the plains, and the wind carried the faint echo of distant animals, lions, jackals, and birds, as if the wild itself called out for its lost child. The priests interpreted these sounds as omens, declaring that the death of Enkidu had unsettled the balance between nature and civilization. The wild had given one of its own to mankind, and now that gift had been reclaimed. In the stillness of those nights, Gilgamesh often ascended to the summit of the temple tower, the ziggurat that rose above all of Uruk. From there, he could see the lights of the city flickering like fireflies below, and beyond them, the dark expanse of the wilderness. He stood alone, the wind sweeping through his garments, his gaze fixed upon the endless horizon where earth and sky met. To him, that distant line no longer marked the boundary of his domain. It had become a symbol of the unknown, the place beyond which all mortal things pass. Though he spoke little, the king's attendants saw changes in his bearing. His strength had not diminished, but it had taken on a different character. The fire of conquest had cooled, replaced by a quiet determination that seemed both somber and unbreakable. Those who saw him said he walked like one who had been touched by the gods, not with pride, but with knowledge too heavy for mortal hearts. The death of Enkidu had not destroyed him, it had remade him. The priests of Anu observed celestial signs during this time. Strange movements of the stars and an unusual stillness in the heavens were recorded on their clay tablets. They interpreted these as omens connected to the fate of Uruk's king. One tablet described the alignment of certain constellations that symbolized a crossing between worlds, a moment when the path to the divine realm might open to a mortal who sought it. The priests could not know it then, but their records foretold the journey that Gilgamesh would soon undertake. The people of Uruk continued to honor Enkidu's memory with offerings and songs. Each new moon, they gathered at the temple of Ishtar, where the priests recited hymns in his name. They spoke of his strength, his loyalty, and his transformation. They told of how the gods had shaped him from clay, how he had befriended the king, and how through his death, mankind had been reminded of its place within the cosmic order. Children grew up hearing his name spoken alongside those of the gods, and in time, Enkidu became not merely a companion of Gilgamesh, but a figure of reverence in his own right. Yet within the heart of the king, no ritual could soothe the ache of loss. Each passing season deepened his awareness of the transience of life. He began to perceive the world differently, not as a stage for his glory, but as a realm bound by impermanence. The rising of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the blooming and withering of the fields, all seemed to him reflections of a single, unyielding truth. Everything that lives must die, and all that is built must one day fall. This realization, though born of sorrow, ignited within him a new resolve. If death claimed all, then there must be something beyond it, something that endured when life ended. He began to contemplate the legends of old, the stories of those who had transcended mortality. He recalled the ancient tales of Utnapishtim, the one who had survived the great flood and had been granted eternal life by the gods. These stories, once dismissed as distant myth, now stirred in him a longing that he could not ignore. The priests noticed the change. They saw that the king's mourning had turned to contemplation, and contemplation to purpose. They warned him that the secrets of immortality were not meant for mortals, even those of divine blood. But Gilgamesh, who had once challenged gods and conquered their monsters, was not one to be restrained by fear. The death of Enkidu had taught him that death was universal. It had not taught him to accept it. In the chronicles of Uruk, the scribes wrote that in the year following the death of Enkidu, the king began preparations for a journey beyond the known world. He spoke little of his intent, but his actions made it clear. He ordered provisions gathered, maps of distant lands consulted, and offerings made to the gods who governed the paths of the earth. He studied the routes that led beyond the plains, across the mountains, and into the uncharted lands where the sun was said to rise and set. The people, hearing whispers of his purpose, looked upon him with awe and fear. Some believed he sought vengeance upon the gods, others thought he sought wisdom. But those closest to him, the priests, the scribes, and the elders, understood the truth. The king of Uruk was preparing to seek that which no mortal had ever attained, freedom from death itself. Before his departure, the city held one final ceremony of remembrance for Enkidu. The priests assembled at dawn, and the people gathered beneath the temple walls. The air was heavy with incense, and the first rays of sunlight turned the stone of Uruk to gold. Gilgamesh stood before the gathered crowd, silent as always, his presence commanding reverence. Though he said no word, his bearing conveyed the purpose that filled him. The people sensed that this was not merely a farewell to his companion, but to the life he had known. When the ceremony ended, Gilgamesh turned from the city and began his journey into the wilderness. Behind him, the gates of Uruk closed with the sound of iron against stone. Before him stretched the unending plain, vast, empty, and silent. He walked not as a conqueror, but as a seeker. The path that awaited him would lead beyond the lands of men, through deserts and mountains, across seas and into the shadowed realm where no mortal had dared tread. Thus ended the chapter of the Bull of Heaven and the death of Enkidu, a turning point in the tale of the demigod king. From the bonds of friendship and the agony of loss arose the beginning of the greatest journey ever undertaken by man. The gods had struck him with sorrow, yet in doing so, they had set him upon the path of revelation. Through Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh would come to confront not only the power of the divine, but the essence of existence itself. The chronicles of Uruk would record that in those days, the king walked out of the city alone, guided by the memory of his fallen friend and the relentless question that now defined him. The name of Enkidu would remain upon his lips, not as lamentation, but as invocation, a reminder of what was lost and what might yet be found beyond the reach of time. And so, from the dust of the bull's defeat and the grave of the wild man, began the search that would carry Gilgamesh to the very edge of the world and beyond, into the realm where life and death meet and the mystery of immortality waits to be revealed. The plain of Uruk stretched endlessly behind him, shimmering under the light of the Mesopotamian sun. The king of Uruk, once surrounded by courtiers, warriors, and priests, now walked alone. The roads that had borne the weight of his armies now carried only his solitary steps. Dust rose from the dry earth and clung to his garments. The wind, once his herald in battle, now pressed against him with indifference. He moved without ceremony, leaving behind the gleaming walls that had been his pride and the city that had celebrated his name. His sandals cut through the sand, his eyes fixed upon the horizon, that distant, unreachable line where the mortal world touched the mysteries beyond. The people who had gathered to watch him depart had long since vanished from sight. Behind him lay civilization, before him the uncharted realm of gods, beasts, and spirits. The wilderness spread vast and unending. Dry hills rose and fell like waves frozen in stone. The vegetation thinned with each passing day until even the hardy shrubs gave way to rock and sand. The air grew heavy, dry and still. In the heat of the day, the horizon wavered and the sky appeared to breathe. The only sound was the steady rhythm of his footsteps and the sighing of the wind through the empty places of the earth. Each night he lay upon the ground, beneath a sky strewn with stars that seemed to burn colder than the earth beneath him. He had once seen those constellations as symbols of divine favor, the markers of gods who watched from above. Now they appeared distant and silent, remote fires that neither blessed nor condemned. He slept little, for in the silence of the wilderness the boundaries between waking and dreaming dissolved. The world around him seemed to hum with unseen presence, the residue of creation itself, unshaped by the hands of men. As he journeyed farther from the lands of the living, the features of the world began to change. Rivers sank into the ground and vanished. The soil hardened to stone, and the mountains ahead glowed faintly at their summits, touched by a light not of the sun. The ancient texts of Uruk had spoken of this place, the threshold of the divine realm, the boundary where the path of the sun entered and left the world. It was here, at the mountain called Mashu, that Gilgamesh knew he must pass to continue his journey. Mashu was a mountain of twin peaks that reached from the horizon to the stars. One peak touched the rising sun, the other the setting. Between them lay a gate through which the sun itself was said to pass each day, entering the underworld at dusk and re-emerging at dawn. The mountain marked the edge of the human world and the beginning of the lands that belonged to eternity. As he approached, the ground darkened beneath his feet, scorched by the passage of celestial fire. The air thickened and trembled with invisible power. From the peaks above came the faint sound of wind, though the valley below lay still. The rocks glowed faintly as if lit from within, and the shadows cast by the mountains shifted even though the sun was steady. Gilgamesh felt the presence of forces older than the gods of Uruk. Forces that had existed before the first city was built, before men had named the constellations. At the gate of Mashu stood the guardians of the horizon, the scorpion beings whose bodies combined the forms of man and beast. Their torsos were shaped like those of warriors, yet their lower halves extended into the barbed tails of scorpions. Their eyes shone like molten bronze, and their armor gleamed with the hue of twilight. They were the sentinels of the boundary between light and darkness, set there to guard the path of the sun and to prevent mortals from trespassing into the realms of the divine. Their presence radiated both majesty and terror. The mere sight of them caused the stones to tremble and the air to quiver. They were not creatures of malice, but embodiments of cosmic law, stationed where the mortal and immortal worlds touched. The ancient epics of the priests had described them as older than the flood, older even than the gods who ruled the heavens. Gilgamesh, though weary, did not falter. The purpose that had driven him from Uruk carried him forward to the foot of the mountain. The guardians beheld him in silence, their eyes piercing through the mortal veil to the divine blood that ran within him. They recognized in him both the lineage of gods and the weight of mortality. For a time, the air between them shimmered with unspoken understanding, a silent recognition that he stood not as conqueror, but as seeker. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the great gate of Mashu opened. The motion was soundless, yet immense. The air seemed to fold upon itself, and the light of the sun dimmed as though entering shadow. Beyond the gate lay a passage unlike any in the mortal world, a corridor of pure darkness stretching into the depths of the mountain. This was the path the sun took each night through the underworld before rising again in the east. It was said that no mortal who entered that tunnel had ever returned, for within it there was no light, no time, no breath of living air. Gilgamesh stepped forward, his figure swallowed by the shadow of the gate. The guardians watched him go, their eyes gleaming faintly until the last trace of his form vanished into the mountain. Inside, the world became void. There was no sound, no light, no measure of distance. The air was still and heavy, pressing upon him like the weight of the deep earth. The ground beneath his feet was smooth, yet its substance was neither stone nor soil. It felt as though he walked upon the skin of creation itself. In this place, day and night had no meaning. The passage seemed to stretch without end. Time dissolved, replaced by the pulse of his heartbeat and the rhythm of his footsteps. Occasionally, faint glimmers flickered in the distance, not of flame or sunlight, but of some deeper luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the unseen forces of the world. As he walked, the temperature shifted around him, at times freezing, at times burning. The walls of the tunnel shimmered faintly with shapes that seemed to move when not directly seen. Figures of gods, beasts, and constellations, their outlines blending into one another as though the stone itself remembered creation. The deeper he went, the more he felt that he was walking not through space, but through the memory of the cosmos. At one point, the path opened into a vast cavern. Above him stretched a ceiling that shimmered like the surface of a dark sea, reflecting faint light from unseen sources. The floor was scattered with fragments of ancient forms, the remains of forgotten beings, creatures that had once been divine but had lost their place in the order of the world. Some resembled winged serpents, others great birds turned to stone. Between them ran streams of black water that gave no reflection. Gilgamesh continued onward. The air grew denser, filled with the scent of minerals and the faint echo of distant movement. Not of life, but of shifting essence. The darkness thickened until it became tangible, pressing against his body. Yet he did not stop. The same determination that had driven him against Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven now guided him through the underworld's threshold. After what might have been days or moments, for time had lost all meaning, a faint light appeared ahead. It began as a mere glimmer, then grew until it illuminated the walls of the tunnel in pale gold. The air grew warmer, and the texture of the ground changed beneath his feet, softening from the smooth, unnatural surface to the coarse feel of sand. He stepped out of the tunnel and emerged into a world unlike any he had known. Before him stretched a vast, radiant plain bordered by waters that shimmered like glass. The sky above was neither day nor night, but a perpetual twilight suffused with the color of dawn. Strange plants grew along the shore, their leaves silver, their fruit glowing faintly as though lit from within. A fragrance filled the air, sweet and unfamiliar, carrying the scent of untouched creation. This was the Garden of the Sun, the land where the sun rested before rising into the world of men. It was said to be a place of pure life, untouched by death or decay, where every leaf and stone bore the imprint of divine energy. The light here was not the light of the mortal sun, but a reflection of eternal fire, soft, steady, and unchanging. For a moment, the landscape appeared timeless, as though nothing in it had ever changed. Yet beneath its beauty lay a stillness that hinted at great distance from the living world. This was not a paradise for men, but a threshold, the place where the immortal gathered strength before re-entering the cycle of existence. Gilgamesh walked among the shining trees, his footsteps leaving no mark upon the ground. The air itself seemed to bear him forward, guiding him toward the far edge of the plain, where the waters of the world met the sky. Somewhere beyond those waters lay the path to the one he sought, Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the flood. But between them stretched the sea known as the Waters of Death, through which no mortal could pass unprotected. And so, the king of Uruk stood upon the shore of eternity, the wilderness of men behind him and the sea of death before him. The path that had begun in grief had carried him to the threshold of the divine. Before him lay the final journey, the crossing of the waters that divided life from death, time from timelessness. The silence of that place was complete. Even the air seemed to hold its breath as he gazed upon the unbroken surface of the sea. The faint shimmer of the horizon suggested no end, no beginning, only continuation. It was here that the mortal and immortal worlds touched most closely, and it was here that Gilgamesh would test the limits of both. The air over the shore was dense and still, as though time itself hesitated at the edge of this place. The horizon gleamed faintly, neither water nor sky but a merging of both, an endless mirror upon which the faint light of eternity drifted. No wind stirred the surface, no wave broke its silence. The sea before Gilgamesh was not water as men knew it. It was the waters of death, the eternal barrier separating the realm of the living from the dwelling place of the undying. Legends told that the touch of these waters was annihilation. Even a single drop could dissolve the thread that bound spirit to body. No bird flew above it, no fish swam beneath it. It was the stillness of death itself, stretched into infinity. To cross it meant to walk through the very essence of mortality. The king of Uruk stood upon the gleaming sand where the living world faded into this eternal boundary. Around him, the landscape was barren yet radiant, washed in the dim light of a sun that neither rose nor set. The trees that had glowed faintly in the Garden of the Sun ended here, their roots recoiling from the deadly shore. The silence was profound. Even the faint hum of unseen life that had filled the divine plain had now faded. He examined the surface of the sea. It was smooth as glass, reflecting his form back to him in perfect stillness, a mirror of life poised above death. In that reflection, the human and divine sides of his being seemed to merge into one shadow, the shape of a creature not entirely of either world. Far out upon the water, faint shapes drifted, fragments of boats, traces of wood that shimmered and vanished like ghosts. Ancient myths spoke of vessels that had once attempted this crossing. Some had carried mortals seeking forbidden knowledge, others the souls of kings bound for judgment. None had ever returned. Gilgamesh began to move along the shoreline, following its arc as it curved into the distance. The sand beneath his feet grew darker, its grains metallic and cold. Occasionally, he found scattered stones etched with marks that no human hand could have made, symbols of gods who had once marked the limits of life. In time, he came upon the remnants of an ancient harbor. Its pillars had long crumbled, its docks lay half-buried beneath layers of dust and salt. Yet among the ruins stood the faint outline of a vessel, a craft unlike any he had seen before. Its hull shimmered faintly, not of timber but of a substance that seemed halfway between stone and light. Its surface bore no mark of decay. It rested upon the sand as though awaiting its final voyage. Gilgamesh approached and placed his hand upon its side. The material was cool to the touch, resonating faintly beneath his palm. This was no mortal ship. It was said that, long ago, the immortal Utnapishtim had dwelled beyond these waters, and that ferrymen of the gods had once carried divine messengers across this sea. Whether this vessel was one of theirs or a remnant of another age, he could not know. Yet it was clear that it had not belonged to the realm of men. He examined the shore and found near the prow a cluster of worn stones arranged in deliberate formation. They formed a path that led to a shallow rise in the land, where a single ancient tree stood, its bark silver, its leaves faintly luminescent. Beneath the tree's roots, the soil pulsed faintly, as though something beneath the ground breathed in rhythm with the world. The air around the place vibrated with quiet presence. It was as if the memory of divine passage lingered there. The legends of Uruk had spoken of an immortal who dwelt beyond the sea, Utnapishtim, chosen by the gods to survive the flood that had destroyed the first age of mankind. To reach him, one had to cross the waters of death by a vessel untouched by mortal hands and by means that defied the natural order. For a time, Gilgamesh stood motionless, the soundless expanse of the sea stretching before him. He knew that this crossing was the boundary between the known and the eternal. Yet even in this silence, the divine spark within him, that fragment of Lugalbanda and the goddess Ninsun, responded to the presence of this place. He was neither entirely mortal nor divine, and perhaps for that reason alone the barrier before him did not reject him outright. He stepped into the vessel. It did not creak or shift as mortal ships do. Instead, it responded like a living thing, its surface vibrating faintly beneath his feet. As he took hold of the edge and set his gaze forward, the air grew heavy and the boundary between land and sea blurred. He pushed the craft forward. To his astonishment, it did not sink into the water, but glided upon its surface, carried not by wind or current, but by the will that drove him onward. The waters of death parted slightly before its bow, leaving a thin path of shimmering darkness. Behind the vessel, the water closed again in utter silence, erasing all trace of his passage. The journey across seemed endless. The horizon never changed, and no sound disturbed the silence. The water reflected the dim twilight above, an eternal dusk that neither brightened nor faded. Occasionally, the surface beneath him rippled faintly, not from any current, but from unseen forces moving deep below. The vessel seemed to drift through layers of the world itself, passing from one reality to another. At times, faint shapes appeared beneath the surface, colossal shadows, outlines of forms that might have been the remnants of forgotten gods or the memories of ancient beings lost in the flood. They moved slowly, their vast silhouettes indistinct, yet their presence filled the sea with an invisible weight. The stillness of the air pressed upon his lungs. The silence was so complete that even the sound of his heartbeat seemed foreign. Hours or days passed. The passage of time had no meaning here. The constant twilight gave no sign of morning or night. Gilgamesh continued to propel the vessel forward, guided only by the faint pull of destiny. His body moved by instinct, his mind fixed upon the goal beyond sight. The water's surface mirrored the heavens above, so that it seemed he drifted through the space between two skies, the mortal above and the divine below. Eventually, a faint shimmer appeared in the distance. It began as a glint, then grew into a steady radiance unlike any he had yet seen. The sea beneath him grew lighter, as though illuminated from below. The boundary between water and air dissolved, and the vessel began to move with a strange ease, as though drawn forward by an unseen current. The light before him expanded until it filled the horizon, and within it emerged the outline of a distant shore. The sands there shone white, and beyond them rose fields of green, bathed in perpetual dawn. The sight was unlike anything of the mortal world. The colors seemed richer, the air purer, the light suffused with life itself. This was Dilmun, the land of eternal life, the dwelling place of Utnapishtim. As the vessel reached the shore, it slowed and came to rest upon the sand. The air here was soft and fragrant, carrying the scent of water lilies and myrrh. The sky overhead glowed with the same golden hue as early morning, though no sun was visible. The earth beneath his feet felt alive, pulsing faintly with energy. He stepped onto the shore and looked around. The landscape spread in gentle hills and fertile plains, threaded with rivers that glowed faintly with inner light. Trees with golden leaves and silver bark swayed gently in a breeze that could not be felt. The rivers murmured with a sound that was almost music, their waters forming patterns that shimmered like woven silk. Farther inland, the terrain rose into terraces of stone, each one carved with ancient symbols of the gods. Upon the highest terrace stood a great dwelling, its walls glimmering faintly as though forged from sunlight and mist. It was unlike the palaces of Uruk. No mortar or timber, only light shaped into permanence. Gilgamesh ascended the terraces. Each step felt lighter, yet the air grew heavier, filled with the essence of eternity. When he reached the top, he beheld the dwelling of Utnapishtim, the faraway, the immortal who had survived the flood of the first age. The figure who dwelt there was not divine in appearance, but bore the quiet weight of timelessness. His form was human, yet his presence radiated the stillness of eternity. The air around him shimmered faintly, and the lines of age upon his face bore no weakness, only the record of ages uncounted. Around him, the air was filled with symbols that shifted like the surface of water. They were the remnants of divine decrees, the language of creation that had once spoken the flood into being. His dwelling stood as a monument to the covenant between gods and men, the memory of a world remade. Gilgamesh approached the immortal man with reverence. He, who had defied death and the gods in equal measure, now stood before the only being who had conquered mortality, not through conquest, but through divine exception. The meeting of the two marked the convergence of eras, the mortal king seeking eternal life, and the immortal man who had lived beyond the reach of time. Utnapishtim regarded him in silence. The air between them vibrated faintly with unspoken understanding. In this moment, the journey of Gilgamesh, the battles, the triumphs, the grief, converged into a single act of seeking. Here, at the edge of eternity, he stood face to face with the one who embodied what he sought. The landscape around them seemed to pause. The rivers slowed, the air grew still, and the golden light deepened. The silence held not emptiness, but the fullness of unspoken truth. The recognition that life and death, mortal and divine, were not separate realms, but reflections of a single cycle. Here, at the end of the world, Gilgamesh would learn what the gods had chosen to conceal from humankind. But the revelation, when it came, would not grant him what he sought. For even in the land of immortals, the essence of mortality endures. In the still air of Dilmun, time held no dominion. The rivers glided through the land like veins of light, and the sky rested upon the earth in unbroken calm. The dwelling of Utnapishtim shimmered in the eternal dawn, untouched by decay or shadow. Gilgamesh stood before the immortal man, his figure small against the vast serenity of the divine realm. Utnapishtim regarded him with a stillness that belonged to ages beyond human comprehension. Around him, the air was dense with memory, the residue of creation itself. It was said that in his presence, the past and present intertwined, that the very act of remembering could summon forth the events of long-forgotten ages. And as Gilgamesh stood before him, the air began to shift. The light dimmed slightly, and the golden plains of Dilmun wavered as though the world itself recalled its oldest wound. Utnapishtim's gaze turned toward the horizon, and in that moment, the story of the flood, the defining cataclysm of human history, unfolded again. The world of the First Age had been vast and teeming. Men and gods had dwelled in uneasy proximity, their lives intertwined in the rhythm of nature. But as the generations passed, the clamor of humankind grew unbearable to the divine ears. The gods, weary of the noise of mortals and the chaos of their cities, resolved to end what they had begun. The command for destruction was given, and the floodgates of heaven opened. The seas rose and devoured the earth. The storm swept across the world, shattering mountains and drowning valleys. Darkness swallowed the horizon, and the light of the sun vanished for 7 days and nights. The winds of the deluge carried away the voices of the living until only the sound of water remained. In that age, one man, Utnapishtim, had been chosen by a god of wisdom to preserve life. He was instructed to build a vessel vast enough to contain the seed of every living thing. His hands obeyed, and the ark was constructed upon the plain. When the flood came, it lifted the vessel from the earth and carried it across the face of the waters. The gods, seeing the destruction they had unleashed, wept for their creation. When the storm subsided, the vessel came to rest upon a mountain. Utnapishtim released a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven to seek land. When the raven did not return, he knew that the waters had receded. He offered sacrifice upon the mountain, and the gods, smelling the offering, gathered like flies around the altar. In that moment, the divine council swore never again to destroy humankind so completely. As reward for his obedience and for bearing the burden of survival, Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality. They were set to dwell in Dilmun, beyond the reach of time, to remind both gods and men of the fragile covenant between them. When the vision of the flood faded, silence returned to the Golden Land. The rivers resumed their murmuring, and the air regained its stillness. The memory of divine wrath lingered faintly, a shadow beneath the perpetual dawn. Gilgamesh stood unmoving, his presence dwarfed by the immensity of what he had witnessed. The flood had been both punishment and renewal, destruction and creation. It was the boundary between mortality and divinity, and the immortal before him was its living memory. In the stillness that followed, Utnapishtim regarded the king with the gravity of ages. To test the limits of human will, he set before Gilgamesh a trial, not of battle or conquest, but of endurance. If he could resist the call of sleep for a measure of days, he might prove that the mortal spirit could defy even the laws that bound life and death. The place of the test lay upon a quiet plain near the edge of Dilmun, where the air grew heavy with the scent of lotus and myrrh. The ground there shimmered faintly, for the energy of the gods flowed close to the surface. Gilgamesh lay upon the earth, the weight of his journey pressing upon him. Around him the world was silent, the golden light unchanging. Time passed unmarked, for Dilmun was beyond the rhythm of day and night. Yet even here, within the eternal calm, the mortal frame bore its limits. As stillness deepened, the exhaustion of his travels, the weight of his grief and the fatigue of his mortal flesh began to gather. The air grew warmer, the light dimmer, and the pull of oblivion crept gently upon him. At last, the body that had fought monsters and defied gods surrendered to the silence. He sank into sleep, not in weakness but in accordance with his nature. For though divine blood ran in his veins, his heart beat with the rhythm of man. When he awoke, the stillness around him had not changed, but his trial had ended. The immortal observer had seen the truth that no man, however mighty, could resist the call of rest. The test had revealed not failure, but inevitability, that mortality was not punishment, but law. Yet Utnapishtim, moved by the resolve that had brought Gilgamesh to the edge of eternity, chose to reveal to him one final secret: the existence of the plant of life, hidden beneath the waters of the deep. This plant, whose thorns pierced the skin but restored youth to the bearer, was the closest thing the world possessed to immortality. It did not abolish death, but renewed vitality, allowing life to begin anew. The place where it grew lay beneath the waters at the edge of the world, where the rivers of eternity met the sea. The depths there were guarded by currents so cold and ancient that even the spirits avoided them. Yet Gilgamesh, driven by the purpose that had carried him through shadow and storm, descended into the depths. The water closed above him, heavy and dark. It pressed upon him with the weight of the world, yet his will bore him downward. The depths were silent but alive with unseen motion. He reached into the silt of the ocean floor, his hands searching through the darkness. At last, his fingers brushed against a stem unlike any other, firm, cold, and radiant with faint light. He grasped it and tore it from the bed of the sea. When he rose to the surface, the waters broke around him in ripples of gold and silver, and the plant lay in his hand, glowing faintly in the dim light of Dilmun. He held it not as a trophy, but as a promise, the fragile bridge between mortality and eternity. With it, he turned his vessel back toward the waters of death, intending to carry the gift of renewal to Uruk. His purpose was not selfish. He sought to restore to mankind a measure of what had been lost in the flood. The journey back was long, yet the sea seemed gentler, as though recognizing his triumph. When he reached the shore of the living world once more, the air felt heavier, the colors duller, yet the pulse of life stronger. He had crossed the realms of gods and returned bearing their secret. Days later, as he rested beside a spring near the desert's edge, he placed the plant upon the ground beside him. The air was cool, the sound of the spring soft and constant. The trials of his journey had left him weary, and the peace of the place lulled him into rest. While he slept, a serpent, drawn by the fragrance of the plant, approached. It coiled around the stem and consumed it. As it did, its old skin split and fell away, revealing new scales bright as polished bronze. Renewed, the serpent glided back into the depths, leaving behind the empty space where the plant had lain. When Gilgamesh awoke and saw what had happened, the stillness of the moment was absolute. The gift he had wrested from the deep, the proof that life could be renewed, had slipped beyond his grasp. Yet in that loss, there was no rage, only recognition. The renewal of life belonged to the world itself, not to the possession of men. The serpent, ancient symbol of rebirth, had claimed it by right of nature. He rose and continued his journey home. The lands through which he passed were the same yet changed, not by the world's hand, but by his own eyes. The wilderness seemed less desolate, the rivers less forbidding. Each element of creation bore the quiet dignity of endurance. When at last the walls of Uruk came into view, gleaming in the light of sunset, he paused upon a hill overlooking the city. The towers rose tall, their stone foundations bright against the plain. He beheld them not as a king returning from conquest, but as a man who had seen the boundaries of existence and returned to build within them. The journey that had begun in grief and defiance ended in understanding. He had sought eternal life and found instead the measure of human greatness. That meaning lay not in escaping mortality, but in shaping within its limits something that would endure. The walls of Uruk stood as testament to that endurance. They bore the names of generations, the marks of storms, and the labor of countless hands. They were the creation of mortals who, though bound by time, had carved their memory into stone. As the last light of the day touched the battlements, the king of Uruk returned within his city's gates. The people who beheld him saw not a conqueror of death, but the ruler who had crossed the realms of gods and returned with wisdom. His deeds would be written upon clay, his story recited through ages, carried in the voices of poets and scribes who would speak of the man who sought immortality and found the enduring legacy of humanity instead. Thus ended the quest of Gilgamesh, the king who journeyed beyond the edge of the world. Though the plant was lost, its meaning endured. That life renews itself through memory, through creation, and through the telling of stories. In the stillness of the ages, his name would remain, echoing across time, bound not by flesh, but by the permanence of remembrance. When Gilgamesh emerged from the lands beyond the waters of death, the air of the mortal world greeted him with a familiar heaviness. The winds that swept across the plains of Sumer carried the scent of earth and distance, the living breath of the realm he had once ruled with unshaken confidence. The colors of the world seemed subdued, yet truer, as though the brilliance of immortality had faded from his sight to reveal the enduring subtleties of mortal life. He walked the ancient roads that led toward Uruk, the city whose walls he had built in his youth. The ground beneath his feet was firm and real, a stark contrast to the shimmering surfaces of the divine realm he had left behind. Each step pressed into the dust of time, and with every measure of distance, the weight of his journey settled deeper upon him. He no longer moved with the urgency of conquest, but with the solemn rhythm of one who had traversed the boundaries of existence. The land around him bore the quiet signs of life's continuity. The reeds grew thick along the riverbanks, the irrigation canals glimmered in the sunlight, and the shepherds' flocks moved like shifting clouds across the plains. The people he passed did not know the full scope of his travels, yet they sensed something transformed in the presence of their returning king. He carried no trophies of victory, no spoils of conquest, only the dust of far worlds upon his garments and the silence of comprehension in his bearing. When at last the walls of Uruk came into view, they rose like the embodiment of endurance itself. The ramparts glowed in the late light of the sun, vast and ancient even in their youth. Each brick, set by countless hands, bore the imprint of human will. They were the monument of labor, of purpose, and of faith in the permanence of civilization against the transience of life. As he passed through the city gates, the streets spread before him like a river of stone. The temples stood serene beneath the fading sky. The ziggurat of Inanna gleamed with gold and lapis, its summit touching the horizon. The markets, though quiet in the hour of evening, still carried the scent of spices, wool, and fresh-cut reeds. The world of men, fragile yet vital, continued without pause. Gilgamesh returned to his palace, but not as the man who had left it. The structure, with its towering columns and stone reliefs, seemed both familiar and foreign. Its beauty was no longer a reflection of his pride, but a testament to the collective spirit of his people. He looked upon the carvings of battles, hunts, and triumphs that adorned its walls, and in their stillness lay the essence of his reign. Not in the victories themselves, but in the preservation of memory. In the years that followed his return, Uruk flourished under a quieter strength. The once restless energy that had driven its king to seek eternal life turned inward, becoming the discipline of a ruler devoted to order and legacy. The city's waterways were expanded, its temples restored, and its records inscribed more meticulously than ever before. Under his direction, the scribes of Uruk set down not only the decrees of governance, but also the tales of the world. The songs of heroes, the accounts of floods, the genealogies of gods and men. The clay tablets that bore these inscriptions became the vessels of continuity, enduring through ages as silent witnesses to the breadth of human experience. Gilgamesh understood that through writing, man approached immortality not through his body, but through his works. The plains around Uruk responded to this renewed harmony. The fields yielded abundant grain, the herds multiplied, and the festivals honoring the gods grew in splendor. The rhythm of life regained its balance, as though the gods themselves, appeased by Gilgamesh's acceptance of human limitation, blessed the land with stability. At the heart of the city, the great temple of Inanna became the center of civic and spiritual life. Priests and priestesses tended the sacred fires, ensuring that the divine order was mirrored in the mortal realm. Beneath its rising terraces, artisans carved scenes of cosmic balance, of sun and moon, of birth and death, of man and God intertwined. Each image was a meditation on the truth that Gilgamesh had learned beyond the world's edge, that the mortal and divine were not separate, but part of a single unfolding design. In those years, the figure of Enkidu, the lost companion, remained a quiet presence within Gilgamesh's reign. The wild man's memory lived on in the carvings, in the rituals honoring friendship, and in the stories told at the city's festivals. His image appeared beside the kings in the reliefs of stone lions and cedar forests, a testament to the bond that had shaped the course of the world's oldest tale. The friendship, though ended in flesh, endured in symbol, becoming the mirror of humanity's dual nature, the civilized and the untamed, the bound and the free. Beyond the walls, the Euphrates continued its eternal journey toward the southern marshes. The river was the lifeblood of Uruk, its constant flow a reminder of continuity amid change. Each season it rose and fell, depositing fertile silt upon the plains, just as the cycles of human life replenished the memory of civilization. Gilgamesh often walked along its banks, tracing with his gaze the slow current that wound between reeds and fields. In the river's unending motion, he recognized the truth of existence, that to endure was not to remain unchanging, but to flow forward, reshaping yet remaining whole. His later works focused on fortification and preservation. The outer walls of Uruk, once merely defensive, were expanded to encompass new districts and temples. He ordered that the foundations be set deep into the earth using the finest kiln-fired bricks, each stamped with his royal seal. He commanded that the city's layout reflect divine geometry, that its streets align with the stars and its ziggurats echo the 7 stages of creation. In this vision, the city itself became a reflection of the cosmos. The temples served as the heavens' mirrors, the palace as the axis of earthly rule, and the walls as the boundary between chaos and order. Through architecture, Gilgamesh transformed his understanding of immortality into tangible form. Stone and brick, though perishable in time, could outlast generations. Their endurance would bear the memory of their maker long after his breath had ceased. As the years passed, his body aged, but his stature remained. The golden vigor of youth faded into the solemn majesty of maturity. His hair grew pale, his face marked by the patterns of time, yet his presence retained the authority of divine heritage. The people of Uruk revered him not for eternal youth, but for the wisdom that came with age, a wisdom tempered by suffering and redeemed through understanding. In these years, the scribes began to record the story of his deeds. They inscribed upon clay the epic of his journeys. The building of Uruk, and the encounter with the immortal. These writings, set in cuneiform script and baked in the fires of the city's kilns, became the eternal archive of his reign. Through these tablets, his voice would pass into eternity, not as divine command, but as human remembrance. The epic itself became a form of immortality, a living monument not of stone, but of words. It carried his name across generations, from Sumer to Akkad, from Babylon to Assyria, and beyond the fading horizons of history. The clay bore his memory as surely as the bricks bore his walls. Uruk thrived under his rule, becoming not only a city of might, but a center of learning and craftsmanship. The schools of scribes flourished, artisans mastered the arts of stone and metal, the priests refined the rituals that bound heaven and earth. In this harmony of purpose, Gilgamesh's reign reached its zenith, a golden age shaped by the balance of power and wisdom. Yet beneath the order and prosperity of Uruk lay the immutable truth of existence, that all things born must pass, and that even the greatest of kings must yield to time. The people whispered reverently of their ruler's longevity, of the divine strength that sustained him beyond the years of ordinary men. But the rhythm of his breath, like that of all mortals, moved toward its final rest. Still, his work continued until the last. He commanded new inscriptions to be carved upon the city gates, proclaiming the deeds of Uruk and the wisdom of its ancestors. He established rites of remembrance to honor those who had shaped the city before him, ensuring that the dead would remain part of the living fabric of civilization. In doing so, he wove his own memory into the unbroken chain of human continuity. Thus, in the later years of his life, the restless king who had once defied the gods became the guardian of human legacy. His strength was no longer measured in conquest, but in endurance. The endurance of his city, his people, and the story that would bear his name. And as the sun set upon Uruk's golden walls, its light caught the edges of the ziggurat, the temples, and the river, binding them in a single radiance, the image of permanence born from the transience of life. As the years gathered upon the city of Uruk, the strength of Gilgamesh waned with quiet dignity. The vigor that had once carried him across deserts and oceans gave way to a calm endurance, and his body, once a vessel of divine might, began to bear the marks of time. His shoulders bowed slightly beneath the invisible weight of years, and the gleam of youth that had once set him apart from other men now softened into the gravity of wisdom. The people of Uruk continued to see him as both king and symbol. They revered his presence as one sanctified by divine encounter. In the streets and markets, in the temples and workshops, his name was spoken with reverence not only for his strength, but for his understanding. He had become the embodiment of their history, a living link between the mortal and divine orders. The palace, once the center of command, transformed into a sanctuary of governance and contemplation. The courtyards filled with scholars, scribes, and priests who came to record his decrees and preserve the customs of the city. Within its chambers, reliefs were carved depicting the entirety of his reign, the building of Uruk's walls, the conquest of Humbaba in the cedar forest, the slaying of the bull of heaven, and the journey through the waters of death. Each panel was a testament not to domination, but to endurance, the strength to face the inevitable and return to build anew. In his later reign, Gilgamesh turned his attention to the foundations of the world itself, to the natural order that sustained his people. He oversaw the restoration of canals, the reinforcement of levees, and the regulation of trade along the Euphrates. The prosperity of Uruk became his final monument. Its granaries overflowed, its artisans prospered, and its temples glowed with renewed devotion. The harmony between man and land that had once seemed fragile was restored through his patient rule. Yet as the years advanced, signs of the body's mortality grew undeniable. The seasons moved more swiftly, and the distances of his youth seemed longer now. His hands, though steady, carried the faint tremor of age. The priests observed the omens of his decline, the shifting patterns of the stars, the subtle dimming of sacred fires, and they knew that even the son of Lugalbanda and Ninsun could not defy the turning of the world. In the final season of his reign, Gilgamesh withdrew more frequently to the upper terraces of the ziggurat, from which the entire city unfolded below him. From that height, he beheld the labyrinth of streets, the glitter of temple domes, and the ceaseless movement of people in their daily labors. It was a vision of continuity, the living pulse of civilization that would endure beyond his years. He ordered that new tablets be made, inscribed with the chronicles of his reign and the wisdom he had gained from his journey. The scribes worked tirelessly in the halls of record, pressing reeds into clay to capture the king's legacy. Each tablet was dried in the heat of the sun and stored in the great archives, a fortress of memory built not of stone, but of knowledge. These writings, later known to the descendants of Uruk as the Tablets of Kings, recorded not only his deeds, but his understanding of the world's balance. They spoke of the bond between heaven and earth, the necessity of justice, and the virtue of remembrance. Through these tablets, his voice was set within eternity, echoing across the ages in the rhythm of cuneiform. When the omens of his final days grew clearer, the priests and elders of Uruk gathered to prepare the rites that would accompany his passing. For a king who had walked the boundaries of the divine, death could not be treated as mere conclusion. It was transition, a passage into the deeper structure of existence. The priests of Inanna and the temple of Shamash joined in solemn observance. Offerings were placed upon the altars, barley, incense, and honeyed wine. Musicians played the ancient hymns that honored the divine descent, and the air filled with the fragrance of burning cedar. The city, aware of its approaching loss, moved with a subdued reverence. Gilgamesh, though weakened, continued to rule until the final days. His commands were clear, his purpose unwavering. He saw that Uruk's walls were maintained, its records preserved, and its leadership secure. He named successors from among the noble houses, ensuring the continuity of order. He decreed that the temples remain open to all who sought communion with the gods, for he had learned that the divine spoke through the enduring harmony of civilization, not through isolated power. In the twilight of his life, the land around Uruk bloomed in quiet prosperity. The river ran steady, the fields were abundant, and the temples resounded with chants of gratitude. It was as if the gods themselves had granted peace in recognition of the king's acceptance of mortal truth. When the final illness came upon him, it descended not with violence, but with inevitability. The healers of Uruk, wise in herbs and rituals, tended to him with reverence. They anointed him with oils, burned incense in his chamber, and recited invocations of health. Yet the king's eyes, though heavy with age, held the same distant calm that had marked him since his return from beyond the world's edge. His time among men was drawing to a close. The day of his death arrived with the rising of a pale dawn. The sun emerged over the horizon, washing the city in amber light. The bells of the temples rang in unison, echoing across the plains. In that hour, the breath of the king ceased, and a great stillness settled upon Uruk. The mourning of the city was vast. From the palace to the fields, from the ziggurat to the riverbanks, the people cast dust upon their heads and clothed themselves in linen. The priests raised hymns to the gods of the underworld, and the women of the temple wailed in ritual lamentation. The air itself seemed to vibrate with sorrow, for the ruler who had walked among men and gods alike had departed the living world. His body was laid upon a bier of cedar and gold, surrounded by offerings of fruit, oil, and lapis. The scent of frankincense filled the palace chambers, mingling with the salt of tears. The priests chanted the long funerary liturgy, invoking Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, to receive his spirit with honor. The doors of the underworld were imagined opening in the hymns, their hinges creaking like thunder across the boundaries of existence. The burial of Gilgamesh was unlike any before or since. His tomb was built beneath the river itself, according to the ancient rite of the sacred kings of Sumer. The Euphrates was temporarily diverted from its course, and a great chamber was constructed in the riverbed. Within it, his body was laid upon a platform of stone, surrounded by treasures of his reign, weapons, ornaments, and tablets of inscription. The walls were sealed with pitch and gold, and the river was returned to its flow, burying him beneath the eternal waters. The symbolism of his burial was profound. To rest beneath the river was to lie within the boundary between life and death, between the fertile lands of the living and the dark realm of the underworld. The waters that nourished Uruk now guarded its king, ensuring that his presence would remain forever entwined with the city's lifeblood. As generations passed, the place of his burial became legend. The priests told of how his spirit had been welcomed into the underworld as judge among the dead. One who, by virtue of his wisdom and divine lineage, was granted authority among the spirits. It was said that Gilgamesh sat beside Nergal and Dumuzi in the halls of the dead, ensuring that justice reigned even in the realm of shadows. Through this transformation, the king of Uruk achieved the immortality he had once sought in vain, not through the unending life of the body, but through the perpetuity of spirit and remembrance. His soul, it was said, walked the paths of the underworld with the calm majesty of one who had accepted the order of creation. His memory remained alive among the living, his spirit honored in the rituals of kingship and the recitations of poets. Each year, on the anniversary of his death, the priests of Uruk performed rites at the temple of Inanna. They offered libations and sang the hymns of remembrance, recounting the deeds of their eternal king. The people gathered along the riverbanks, lighting lamps that floated upon the current. The flames drifted slowly downstream, carrying with them the prayers of the living to the hidden realm of the dead. In these ceremonies, the bond between Gilgamesh and his people endured. His life became the measure of all rulers who followed, his wisdom the model of kingship. To rule justly was to emulate Gilgamesh. To build enduringly was to honor his legacy. In time, he ceased to be merely a historical figure and became a divine presence, a guardian spirit of civilization itself. The later kings of Mesopotamia invoked his name in their inscriptions, seeking his blessing and legitimacy. His image appeared in seals, reliefs, and hymns. In the temples of Babylon and Nineveh, his story was recited as both history and myth. The scribes copied and recopied the tablets of his epic, ensuring that no generation would forget the man who had sought eternity and found it in remembrance. Thus, the mortal who had once defied the gods became their companion. His reign upon earth had ended, but his dominion in memory had only begun. The clay tablets, the walls of Uruk, the flow of the river, all carried his essence. In the hearts of his people, he remained the eternal king. The city that he had built continued to flourish, its people living beneath the protection of the memory that bore his name. The waters of the Euphrates, flowing above his hidden tomb, whispered his story in their ceaseless passage. The reeds that grew upon its banks bent in the wind as if in reverence. Time moved forward, but the mark of Gilgamesh remained carved into the substance of the world. And so, in the quiet beneath the river, where the currents of life and death intertwined, the spirit of the king rested in the unending rhythm of eternity. Following the burial of Gilgamesh beneath the flowing waters of the Euphrates, the story of the once mortal king gradually shifted from historical record to the realm of myth and cosmic significance. His mortal coil had been relinquished, but his essence remained vibrant in the imagination and rituals of his people and their descendants. Through the passage of centuries, the legacy of Gilgamesh evolved. He transcended the limitations of flesh and time, becoming a figure whose life and deeds continued to illuminate the human condition and the mysteries of existence. The Mesopotamian underworld, a shadowed realm governed by the goddess Ereshkigal and her consort Nergal, was imagined as a vast, somber kingdom beneath the earth. It was a place where the souls of all departed found rest, yet the status of the dead varied greatly. Among these shades, Gilgamesh occupied a place of distinction, a ruler who not only once walked among mortals and gods, but had entered the forbidden boundaries of death and returned to life, thus granting him an unparalleled authority over the domain of spirits. This mythic positioning is evident in the later traditions that describe Gilgamesh sitting as judge alongside divine figures within the courts of the underworld. His wisdom, tempered by his earthly experiences and divine heritage, gave him a unique role to adjudicate disputes among the dead, to maintain order, and to serve as a guardian of the cosmic balance between life and death. Thus, even in death, Gilgamesh retained sovereignty, becoming a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead, a mediator between the mortal realm and the divine order. The symbolism of his burial beneath the Euphrates reinforced this liminal status. The river itself was a source of life, sustenance and renewal for Uruk, but its depths also marked the threshold of the unknown, the passage into darkness and silence. By resting beneath its currents, Gilgamesh was forever connected to the lifeblood of the city and the eternal flow of time. His tomb was invisible but omnipresent, a sacred place where the mortal and the eternal intertwined. Over the centuries, the Epic of Gilgamesh was retold and reimagined in various Mesopotamian centers of culture, including Ur, Babylon, and Nineveh. Each retelling added layers of complexity to his character, shifting the focus from the literal deeds of a powerful king to the universal themes of friendship, loss, the search for immortality, and the acceptance of human limitation. The narratives became a mirror reflecting the values and existential concerns of successive generations. The tablets discovered centuries later, painstakingly copied by scribes in cuneiform script, reveal how the story of Gilgamesh maintained its vitality through adaptation. The oldest versions focus heavily on his heroic exploits, his battles with supernatural creatures, and his quest for eternal life. Later versions deepen the philosophical reflections on mortality and the nature of humanity's place in the cosmos. This transformation is emblematic of the enduring power of myth. Gilgamesh, once a historic figure whose reign was chronicled in the annals of Uruk, transcended history to become an archetype, a representation of the human struggle to find meaning in the face of death and the desire to leave a lasting mark upon the world. His journey was not merely physical, but existential, addressing the core of what it means to be mortal. The legacy of Gilgamesh extended beyond the borders of Mesopotamia, influencing neighboring cultures and shaping the literary and religious traditions of the ancient Near East. His story resonated with shared themes found in other mythologies, including the heroic quest, the confrontation with death, and the search for divine favor. In time, Gilgamesh's name became synonymous with the ideal ruler, wise, strong, and tempered by experience. Kings who followed often sought to associate themselves with his image, drawing upon his legend to legitimize their rule and connect themselves to the divine ancestry that Gilgamesh embodied. Statues and seals bore his likeness. Temple inscriptions invoked his name as a protector and exemplar. Beyond political uses, Gilgamesh's story permeated religious practice. The temples of Inanna and Shamash included recitations of his epic in their liturgies, emphasizing the king's role as the bridge between gods and men. His myth functioned as a teaching tool, a reminder of the necessity of justice, the pursuit of wisdom, and the acceptance of mortality. Even after the fall of Uruk as a political center, the memory of Gilgamesh survived in the hearts of the people and the archives of scribes. The epic was preserved on clay tablets buried in the ruins of ancient libraries, hidden beneath layers of sediment and time. These tablets, discovered in modern times, rekindled the story of the king who sought immortality and found instead the eternal legacy of memory. The story's rediscovery in the modern era brought Gilgamesh to a new audience, revealing the depth and sophistication of Mesopotamian civilization and its contributions to human thought. Today, Gilgamesh stands as a testament to the power of myth to articulate universal truths and as a symbol of humanity's timeless quest for meaning. Thus, the journey of Gilgamesh, king, hero, mortal, and spirit, spans not only the physical landscapes of ancient Mesopotamia, but also the metaphysical realms of life, death, and memory. His story continues to inspire, reminding all who encounter it that while mortal bodies may perish, the impact of a life well lived endures beyond the confines of time. In the end, the life of Gilgamesh stands as one of the earliest and most profound meditations on the nature of existence. His story, formed at the dawn of civilization, endures not because of divine strength or royal authority, but because it captures the unchanging contours of the human journey. From his mighty deeds in the cedar forest to his anguished search across the edges of the world, he embodied the tension between aspiration and limitation, between mortality and the yearning for permanence. Thus, the king who once ruled Uruk with unmatched strength achieved a place among the eternal, not through the conquest of death, but through the echo of his story. The rivers that flowed above his resting place carried whispers of his deeds across ages, and the walls he built stood as symbols of his enduring purpose. In every retelling, Gilgamesh rises again, not as one who defeated mortality, but as one who gave it meaning through his acceptance and understanding. In this way, his quest did not fail. It simply took a different form, living on in the remembrance of those who repeat his tale. The epic of his life, preserved against the eroding power of time, affirms that while every life must end, the legacy of a life that touches others may become everlasting. Through stone, clay, and memory, Gilgamesh endures, not as a fleeting monarch of Uruk, but as an eternal presence in the human imagination, forever guiding those who seek to understand the nature of their own mortality.